She was 28 years old when they found her body in a shallow creek bed just outside the city limits, her car abandoned 3 miles away with the keys still in the ignition and her phone wiped clean of messages. Within 48 hours, investigators discovered something that would send shockwaves through the entire federal court system. The last person to see her alive was a sitting federal judge, a man whose face had been plastered across national news for presiding over one of the most politically explosive trials in decades. But here's what made this case different. The timeline didn't add up. Security footage contradicted his alibi, and buried in recovered data from her laptop was evidence of an affair he'd sworn under oath never existed. What really happened in those final hours? And how far will power go to protect itself when everything is about to collapse? Her name was Sarah Mitchell, a 28-year-old court stenographer who had worked in the federal courthouse for 3 years, known for her meticulous work ethic and quiet professionalism. Judge Richard Calloway was 52, a decorated federal judge with a spotless reputation, married for 26 years, appointed by the president himself, and currently overseeing a corruption trial involving 3 state senators and millions in illegal campaign funds. Their connection wasn't professional. It was intimate, forbidden, and had been hidden from everyone for nearly 18 months, until it wasn't. When Sarah's body was discovered on a rainy Tuesday morning in October, the case became more than just a homicide. It became a question of how much influence one man could wield to erase the truth. Sarah Mitchell grew up in a working-class neighborhood in Ohio, the youngest of 3 daughters, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a nursing home. She was smart, ambitious, and determined to build a stable life for herself. She moved to Washington, D.C. after college, taking the court stenographer position because it paid well and offered job security. Friends described her as private but warm, someone who kept her personal life separate from work. She had a small circle of close friends, loved yoga, and spent weekends at farmers markets. But in the months before her death, coworkers noticed changes. She seemed distracted, anxious, checking her phone constantly, leaving work early without explanation. One friend later told investigators that Sarah had confided she was involved with someone she couldn't talk about. Someone's career would be destroyed if anyone found out. Judge Richard Calloway was a different story entirely. A Princeton graduate, former prosecutor, and federal judge for 12 years, he was seen as untouchable. His rulings were respected, his temperament controlled, his public image carefully managed. He had 2 grown children, a wife who worked in nonprofit fundraising, and a summer home in the Hamptons. Colleagues described him as demanding but fair, someone who valued discipline and order above all else. He had clerks who feared him, staff who avoided confrontation, and a pattern of ensuring loyalty through intimidation. To the public, he was a pillar of justice. To those who knew him behind closed doors, he was something else entirely. The inner circle was small but critical. Sarah's best friend, Emily Torres, worked as a paralegal in a private firm and was one of the few people Sarah trusted. Emily knew about the affair, but not the full extent of the judge's behavior. Mark Daniels, a fellow stenographer, had noticed Sarah's discomfort around the judge in recent weeks and mentioned it to investigators after her death. On the law enforcement side, Detective Laura Chen led the homicide investigation with a team that included federal agents once the judge's involvement became clear. The district attorney, David Brennan, faced immense pressure as the case threatened to become a political firestorm. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The affair began in March of the previous year during a late-night work session when the judge asked Sarah to stay after hours to finalize transcripts for a high-profile case. What started as professional interaction turned personal within weeks. He was charming, attentive, and made her feel valued in ways she hadn't experienced before. But the relationship was built on secrecy from the start. He insisted they never communicate through courthouse systems, never be seen together in public, and never tell anyone, not even her closest friends. Sarah complied at first, flattered by the attention and convinced it was genuine. But as months passed, the relationship changed. He became controlling, demanding to know where she was at all times, who she spoke to, what she posted on social media. Friends who later reviewed recovered messages described texts that were possessive, threatening, laced with paranoia about exposure. He offered her money to keep quiet, suggested relocating her to another courthouse, even hinted at career consequences if she ever disclosed the relationship. The breaking point came in late August when Sarah told Emily she wanted out. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and terrified of what he might do if she left. She had begun documenting their interactions, saving screenshots, recording voicemails, building a file she hoped would protect her if things escalated. But here's the critical detail. The federal corruption trial involving the state senators was entering its final phase, with closing arguments scheduled for October 3rd. The judge's every move was under scrutiny. Media attention was relentless. Any scandal, any distraction could derail the case and destroy his career. When Sarah told him in early September that she was ending the relationship, his response was chilling. According to recovered messages, he told her she was making a mistake, that she didn't understand what she was risking, that walking away wasn't an option. She stopped responding to his texts. He escalated. The affair first surfaced not through the homicide investigation, but through a leak during the trial itself. On October 3rd, just 4 days before Sarah's body was found, a courthouse staff member noticed the unusual behavior of the judge during a recess. He was visibly agitated, stepped out to make a private call, and returned looking shaken. That same afternoon, a paralegal working on the trial discovered a series of deleted text messages on a shared device used by court staff. Messages that referenced the judge by his first name and contained intimate details that didn't match his public marriage. The paralegal, unsure what to do, reported it to a senior clerk, who escalated it to courthouse security. By the time investigators connected the dots after her death, the timeline was impossible to ignore. She had been at the courthouse the morning of October 2nd for a deposition. Surveillance footage showed her leaving through a side entrance at 4:15 in the afternoon. She never made it home. The reveal hit the courtroom like a shockwave. Staff who had worked alongside Sarah for years suddenly realized they had missed the signs. The judge's demeanor changed overnight. He became defensive, hostile during questioning, refused to address the allegations directly. Legal staff who had always seen him as composed now witnessed something unsettling. A man whose carefully constructed image was unraveling in real time. The timing couldn't have been worse. The corruption trial was still ongoing, and any connection between the judge and a homicide investigation would create grounds for a mistrial, potentially freeing 3 politicians accused of serious crimes.
Pressure mounted from every direction. Federal oversight, media scrutiny, political opponents demanding accountability. And at the center of it all was a dead woman whose voice had been silenced. The last 48 hours of Sarah's life had been pieced together through phone records, security footage, witness statements, and recovered digital data. And what emerges is a portrait of escalating fear. On September 30th, 2 days before her death, Sarah met with Emily at a coffee shop near her apartment. According to Emily's statement, Sarah was visibly shaken, kept checking her phone, and said she felt like she was being watched. She told Emily she had received multiple calls from an unknown number, voicemails that were deleted before she could save them, and that someone had been following her car the previous night. Emily urged her to go to the police. Sarah refused, saying she didn't have enough proof and was afraid of retaliation. That evening, Sarah's phone pinged near the judge's private residence in Arlington, a location she had visited multiple times during the affair, but had avoided for weeks. Investigators believe she went there to confront him one final time, to demand he leave her alone. No one knows what was said during that meeting, because there is no record of it, no security footage, no witnesses. She left his neighborhood at 9:42 p.m. October 1st was a Tuesday, and Sarah went to work as usual. Co-workers described her as distracted, pale, on edge. She left early, citing a headache, and drove to a pharmacy where surveillance footage captured her purchasing over-the-counter medication and checking her phone repeatedly. At 3:15 p.m., her phone received a text from a number later traced to a burner phone purchased with cash 2 weeks prior. The message was simple: "We need to talk. Tonight. Usual place." Investigators believed the usual place referred to a secluded area near Rock Creek Park, a location the judge and Sarah had used for private meetings during the affair. Sarah responded, "I can't do this anymore." The reply came within seconds: "You don't have a choice." At 6:30 p.m., Sarah told her roommate she was going out to meet someone and would be back by 9. She never returned. Her phone's last ping was at 7:18 p.m. near the entrance to Rock Creek Park. After that, it went dark. The gap in the timeline is where everything falls apart. Between 7:18 p.m. on October 1st and 8:30 a.m. on October 3rd, when her body was found, there is no confirmed sighting of Sarah, no phone activity, no credit card transactions. Her car was discovered at 10:15 a.m. on October 2nd in a shopping center parking lot 3 miles from the park. Keys in the ignition, driver's seat adjusted in a way inconsistent with Sarah's height, and her purse missing. A witness reported seeing a dark sedan circling the parking lot around midnight on October 1st, but couldn't identify the make or model. Investigators found tire tracks near where her body was discovered that matched luxury vehicles commonly driven by federal employees. And here's the detail that made everyone pause. Sarah's body showed signs of strangulation, but there were no defensive wounds, suggesting either she knew her attacker or was incapacitated before the assault. A jogger found Sarah's body on the morning of October 3rd, partially concealed under brush near a shallow creek bed in a wooded area just outside the park's main trails. The location was remote, accessible only by foot or a vehicle with off-road capability, and known to local law enforcement as a dumping ground for illegal activity. The jogger called 911 at 8:32 a.m., and patrol officers arrived within minutes. Initial observations were troubling. Sarah was fully clothed, no signs of sexual assault, but her phone, wallet, and car keys were missing. Her clothing was clean, despite being found near muddy terrain, suggesting her body had been moved post-mortem. Lividity patterns indicated she had been placed in the current position within hours of death, not immediately after. Investigators immediately noticed inconsistencies. The scene looked staged. Branches and leaves were arranged in a way that suggested someone tried to conceal the body but lacked the experience to do it convincingly. There were no signs of a struggle at the site, meaning she was likely killed elsewhere and transported. What stood out most to investigators was the familiarity of the crime. Whoever did this knew her well enough to lure her to a secluded location, control the situation without a fight, and had the resources to move her body without being detected. The medical examiner later confirmed time of death between 10 p.m. on October 1st and 2 a.m. on October 2nd, a window that would become critical in establishing opportunity. Trace evidence recovered from her clothing included fibers consistent with high-end automotive interiors, specifically luxury sedans manufactured in the last 3 years. A single hair found on her jacket did not match Sarah's DNA and was later tested against samples from individuals connected to the case. The investigation moved quickly once the connection to Judge Calloway surfaced, and what detectives uncovered in the following weeks painted a damning picture. Physical evidence was limited but significant. Fingerprints lifted from Sarah's car matched her own, and one unidentified set later confirmed to belong to the judge, despite his claim he had never been in her vehicle. Tire tracks near the body dump site matched the tread pattern of a vehicle registered to the judge's wife, a luxury SUV he occasionally drove when his own car was being serviced. Investigators subpoenaed service records and found the vehicle had been detailed 2 days after Sarah's death, an unusual request given it had been cleaned just 3 weeks prior. Soil samples from the SUV's undercarriage contained traces of sediment consistent with the area where Sarah's body was found. There were no usable footprints at the scene, but a torn piece of fabric caught on a branch near the body was later matched to a jacket seen in the judge's chambers during a courthouse security review. Digital evidence became the backbone of the case. Forensic analysts recovered deleted messages from Sarah's laptop showing months of communication between her and a contact saved under a generic name, but later confirmed through metadata to be the judge. The messages detailed their affair, his increasing paranoia, and his explicit threats if she disclosed the relationship. One message sent on September 15th read, "You think you can just walk away? You'll destroy everything I've built. I won't let that happen." Another from September 25th, "I've protected you. Don't make me regret it." The burner phone used to text Sarah on October 1st was traced to a purchase made at a convenience store in Virginia. Surveillance footage from the store showed a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses paying cash, but the angle made identification difficult. However, the timestamp of the purchase coincided with a gap in the judge's official schedule, a 90-minute window where his location was unaccounted for. Phone records placed the judge's personal cell phone near Rock Creek Park at 7:45 p.m. on October 1st, just 27 minutes after Sarah's phone last pinged in the same area. His phone then moved toward Arlington, pinging towers near his residence around 9 p.m. But here's the critical inconsistency. His wife told investigators he didn't arrive home until after 11 p.m., claiming he was working late at the courthouse. Courthouse security logs showed no record of him entering or exiting the building after 5:30 p.m. that day. When questioned, the judge changed his alibi, stating he had stopped for dinner at a restaurant in Georgetown. Investigators checked. No reservation under his name, no credit card transactions, no witnesses who could confirm his presence.
Behavioral observations added another layer. Courthouse staff reported that the judge became increasingly erratic after Sarah's death. He missed hearings, filed motions without proper documentation, and snapped at colleagues who questioned his focus. His assistant later told investigators he had asked her to delete emails from his personal account, a request she found so unusual she documented it in writing. When federal agents interviewed the judge formally, his demeanor was defensive, evasive, and at times hostile. He denied any involvement in Sarah's death, denied the extent of their relationship, and claimed she had been unstable and prone to exaggeration. But as investigators dug deeper, they found his narrative contradicted by every piece of evidence they uncovered. Sarah's friends described her as grounded and responsible. Her medical records showed no history of mental health crises. The only instability in her life, it seemed, came from him. The case against Judge Richard Calloway wasn't built on a single smoking gun, but on an accumulation of motive, opportunity, and means that painted an undeniable picture. Motive was clear. Sarah had become a threat to everything he valued: his career, his reputation, his family, his legacy. The corruption trial he was overseeing had made him a national figure, and any scandal would not only ruin him personally, but could result in a mistrial that would free 3 powerful politicians and destroy public trust in the judicial system. Sarah's decision to end the affair and her growing fear suggested she might go public, either to protect herself or out of desperation. Investigators found drafts of emails on her laptop, unsent messages addressed to courthouse ethics boards detailing the affair and his threats. She hadn't sent them yet, but the judge had no way of knowing that. The possibility that she might expose him was enough. Opportunity aligned perfectly. His alibi for the night of October 1st collapsed under scrutiny. He had access to Sarah's schedule, knew her routines, and had communicated with her using a burner phone purchased during a gap in his official calendar. His vehicle, or one he had access to, matched evidence found at the scene. He had the means to move her body, the authority to avoid immediate suspicion, and the resources to cover his tracks, at least temporarily. Means extended beyond physical capability. As a federal judge, he understood evidence, knew how investigations worked, and had connections throughout the legal and law enforcement community. He could anticipate how detectives would approach the case, what questions they would ask, and how to construct a narrative that deflected blame. But despite his knowledge and influence, he made mistakes. The digital trail, the inconsistent alibi, the physical evidence linking him to the scene, the behavioral changes that raised red flags among those who knew him best. Investigators believed involvement was likely not just because of the evidence, but because no alternative explanation fit the facts. Sarah's death wasn't random. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong or a stranger abduction. It was calculated, personal, and carried out by someone who knew her well enough to control the situation. The judge's reaction to the investigation, his refusal to cooperate fully, his changing stories, all pointed toward guilt. But proving it in court would be another challenge entirely. His legal team was already preparing a defense built on attacking Sarah's credibility, questioning the forensic timeline, and exploiting gaps in the digital evidence. The case became a battle not just of facts, but of narratives, and the outcome would hinge on whether a jury could see past his status and influence to the truth of what happened that night. When the connection between Judge Calloway and Sarah Mitchell became public, the reaction was immediate and explosive. News outlets across the country ran headlines questioning judicial integrity, power abuse, and the lengths influential figures go to protect themselves. The corruption trial he had been overseeing was immediately suspended, and within a week, the presiding appellate court ordered him to recuse himself from all pending cases. Federal oversight agencies launched an internal review of his conduct, examining not just the affair but his entire tenure on the bench, looking for patterns of misconduct, favoritism, or ethical violations. Leaked documents obtained by investigative journalists revealed additional complaints from former clerks and courthouse staff, describing a hostile work environment, inappropriate behavior, and retaliation against those who questioned his authority. Court orders were issued mandating the preservation of all digital communications, financial records, and surveillance footage related to the judge's activities in the months surrounding Sarah's death. Federal warrants were executed at his home, his chambers, and his vehicles, resulting in the seizure of multiple electronic devices, personal documents, and forensic samples. The legal community reacted with shock and division. Some colleagues defended him, citing his years of service and the presumption of innocence. Others quietly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with a case that threatened to undermine public confidence in the judiciary. Political pressure intensified as advocacy groups demanded accountability, transparency, and systemic reforms to prevent abuse of power within the court system. The district attorney faced mounting scrutiny over how the case was being handled, with critics accusing him of either moving too slowly to appease powerful interests or moving too quickly to satisfy public outrage. So what really happened on the night of October 1st? Investigators believe Sarah Mitchell met Judge Richard Calloway at or near Rock Creek Park after he lured her there under the pretense of resolving their situation peacefully. They believe he strangled her, either in a fit of rage or in a calculated attempt to silence her permanently, and then transported her body to the wooded area where it was found. They believe he used his knowledge of evidence collection and criminal investigation to stage the scene, wipe digital traces, and construct an alibi that would protect him, at least initially. But belief and proof are not the same thing. Despite the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, there are gaps that remain unresolved. The burner phone was never recovered. The exact location where Sarah died has never been definitively identified. The timeline between her last phone ping and the discovery of her body contains hours where her movements are unknown. Deleted data that might contain definitive proof of guilt was never fully recovered. And then there are the deeper questions that linger. Did the judge act alone, or did someone help him move the body, clean the vehicle, or destroy evidence? Were there other victims, other affairs, other instances of control and manipulation that never came to light because the women involved were too afraid to speak up? What does this case say about the systems designed to hold powerful people accountable when those same people understand how to exploit and manipulate those systems? Sarah Mitchell deserved justice, safety, and the freedom to walk away from a relationship that had become dangerous. Instead, she became a cautionary story about what happens when power is unchecked and when secrecy is weaponized to protect reputation over truth. The legal process continues, but for those who knew Sarah, the only resolution that matters is one that acknowledges her voice, her fear, and the reality that she tried to escape before it was too late.
So now we turn to you. What part of this timeline raises the biggest red flag in your mind? Do you believe the judge acted alone, or do you think someone else was involved in covering up the crime? And how would you feel if someone you loved was trapped in a relationship like this, where leaving meant risking everything? Let us know in the comments below. If this story affected you, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our next investigation. Because the truth, no matter how buried, always finds a way to surface.